Hey everyone, welcome back. And today I'm going to be doing what if the world has any country draft. So basically, in this country draft, I'm going to be doing either the United States or Russia, and its allies will be going to war. And this time, there won't be any neutral countries. If there's any neutral countries, then the water will be having them. So So first, we see that the United States and Russia has been growing some tensions, and then eventually Russia decides to declare war on the states. So with everyone now seeing that this could become real, let's just say it did become real, and now, yeah, okay. So these are the alliance colors maps. So basically, North America is always it's covered in blue except for Cuba and Nicaragua, and Costa Rica has been sunk into the ocean. Venezuela is with Russia, Bolivia too, while the rest of South America is with America. The entirety of Europe is with America except for Belarus and Serbia, and this Moldovan part, Transnistria. And we also see that the micro countries have been sunk into the ocean, and so is Switzerland and Austria. And over here in Africa, we see pretty much a lot of the countries like Algeria, Libya, Egypt, Niger, Chad, Sudan, Eritrea, South Sudan, Central African Republic, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, and the the Republic of the Congo, was it? And we also see South Africa, while everything else is pro Western. And here in the Arabian Peninsula, we only see Oman and Lebanon being pro Russian. Also, with Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, China, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and of course, North Korea. While over here, we see that Turkmenistan has sank into the ocean, and Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, the Caucasus, Cyprus, India, Nepal, Bhutan, Thailand, the Philippines, Singapore, Australia, Papua New Guinea, New Zealand, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and Mongolia is pro Western. So, as I stated again, there won't be any neutral countries in this scenario since they're all under the ocean now. So, this is the only video where you won't see any white or any countries not in the war. Probably in the beginning part for now. In the ending, there'll probably be some, but right now, there won't be any. So, the first thing that the Americans are going to do is try to get rid of the pro Russians in Central and South America. So, basically, that goes very well since Cuba automatically collapses, Nicaragua falls, and so does Venezuela. And with Bolivia surrounded by pro Westerns, yeah, pretty much they already fall. And yeah, with the North and South America being completely well with the Americans, yeah, they pretty much send all their troops to the rest of the continent. And then pretty much we see some very uh, stupid choices by other countries. For example, this country, which is Guinea-Bissau, is pro-Russian, but is surrounded by pro-Western, and they already collapse. And then over here, we also see that South Africa and also Lesotho and Eswatini made the same mistake. So, whenever Eswatini falls, and so does Lesotho, But that also means that South Africa is getting invaded. And then eventually they capture one of their capitals, and then eventually they capture another capital, and then soon they're able to capture all three capitals, and then they are able to liberate Lesotho and Eswatini. Soon, with all of this, they realize that today now, that the red team in Africa has cut them into two. So this part is now fragile since, I think Nigeria has the strongest military in Africa. I think I'm not positive, but with the red team trying to gear up, we also see that Morocco has been advancing slowly into Algeria. But then, they are able to advance into Tunisia, but then eventually they're halted. And then with some Egyptians, Libyans, Chads, and some Sudanese, I think. I don't know. They are able to liberate Tunisia and Algeria's capital. Uh, I mean, and then eventually they are able to go into a stalemate for a while, but then eventually they are able to advance into Moroccan territory, soon making the country collapse. And then they are able to go into Mauritania and then Mali. And then going into the weaker countries here, invading Togo, Benin, and then Ghana, and then Ivory Coast, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and then eventually pretty much this whole entire part collapses except this part. And then, but they are able to liberate Guinea-Bissau, and then, but if all of the red team in Africa is over here, then that means the blue team right here is able to advance, capturing the Republic of the Congo, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, Cameroon, the Central African Republic, South Sudan, Sudan, and Eritrea. And then over here, we also see that the Arabian Peninsula and some Ethiopians, Somalians, and some others managed to wipe out Yemen, and then they're able to go advance more into the red team territory. But with the troops over here, they start coming back, making this area fall back, able to push them out again, capturing Guinea-Bissau, and then starting to liberate more of their countries. And then eventually they're both into a stalemate. And then in Europe, yeah, a lot is happening. With the Europeans not being prepared, the only ones prepared is Ukraine with the current war they're having for the past few years. But then eventually, with Belarus now declaring war, basically they storm into Kiev, and then eventually Ukraine falls, connecting up with Transnistria, getting Moldova, closing the Suwalki Gap, getting the Baltics. I guess Poland got invaded. And then over here, we also see that Sweden got invaded, but the Swedish are able to push them out. And then they're able to advance some more into European territory, soon going into Serbia, but then eventually they are able to make some Serbians escape their home country by this part of Russia. So they are able to leave, saving their manpower, but in the consequences, the country of Serbia collapses. But we also see that Romania collapses, and so does Bulgaria, and Turkey is split from NATO, and then Greece falls, North Macedonia, Kosovo, Albania, Montenegro, and they storm into Bosnia and Herzegovina, soon liberating all of Serbia. And then they are able to invade a little bit of Italy, but that fails. And then and then over here, the Finnish, yeah, they're into a stalemate, But with the help of the Nordics, with Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, Iceland doesn't have a army, but they still send some like aid, like with food, with water, and other types. So they're able to advance a little bit into the Kola Peninsula in Russia. Soon they're able to capture St. Petersburg, and then little by little going into the Baltics, soon liberating Estonia, and then eventually about to cross down into Latvia. But with also this, we also see that they captured this lake, closing Russia into the Baltic Sea. And over here, we see that NATO is at a full disadvantage since half of their member states are wiped out, and they're gonna continue to get wiped out. And then they get to the Lake of Austria, Prague falls, and now they get more tension as they're getting with the most powerful European countries: Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and the UK. And also Ireland was neutral, so it's also sunk into the ocean. Well, I don't know if it's neutral. That's what I found on Google. Yeah, sometimes don't believe in Google, but sometimes I don't know anymore. But we also see some naval invasions happening in Northern Ireland, which the UK isn't able to sustain. And then we also see some Russians doing a naval invasion into their own territory in the Kola Peninsula. Except, I guess they just walk there since it's frozen. And then eventually they're able to push the Finnish back into their borders, and then soon threatening an encirclement. But little do they know, the Finnish was already a step ahead and encircled the encirclement. And then, yeah, that invasion failed. So a stalemate happens in Europe. And then over here in the Middle East, we see a lot happening. But first, with Syria's new government, they're now pro-Western, and then with the help of Israel and Jordan, they're able to wipe out Lebanon, and they are also able to advance into Egypt, soon threatening their capital, Cairo. And then they decided to go into Iran, passing through the mountainous terrain, but then eventually they get through it, and there were some invasions into the Persian Gulf. They are cut off, and then with India, they also cut Pakistan off, but in the results of that, they lose Kashmir, and then they start advancing, soon advancing into Nepal, soon capturing their capital, and then eventually the country collapses in a matter of years. And then this part of India falls, and so does Bhutan. But that also means that India and in the Middle East are able to close in more in Iran and Pakistan. Soon about to go into Afghanistan, and eventually they get in there. Soon meeting up with the Turkmenistan Sea. Soon eventually Iran collapses, and then yeah, pretty much this whole entire part is already doomed. But eventually, with the help of the Kazakhs and the Uzbeks, they're able to wipe out Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan and move into a little bit of China. But then eventually, yeah, they're into an encirclement and then forced into the Sea of Turkmenistan, eventually liberating Kashmir. And then, with some hard advancements over here, we basically see that yeah, because of the mountains, it's hard to get through this part. So they decided to go through Bangladesh, and then yeah, they managed to wipe out the country, which also means that they are able to liberate some of their territory, and then they're able to invade a little bit of Myanmar, soon connecting up with Thailand, and then yeah, they're cut off from the ocean. But that also means that Thailand is getting invaded basically in all sides, and then eventually Thailand collapses. And then, as the Philippines and Taiwan and Singapore are being surrounded by Reds, China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, and Indonesia, yeah, Singapore collapses, the Philippines collapse, and Taiwan collapses. As for in the Korean Peninsula, we see that, yeah, we see the North pushing in, and then the South is able to push back. The North gets invaded, they push back, and then eventually, yeah, they just invade each other at the same time. Eventually, Japan comes in soon, kicking out all of North Korea. But then eventually, the Chinese comes with a little bit of some Russians, and then they're able to push them back into the Korean Peninsula. And then, yeah, they're back at the border, and then eventually, South Korea gets invaded and destroyed. And then they manage to do some naval invasions into Japan. It gets harder, but eventually they're able to make it in. And then, yeah, basically, they get into the mainland, and yeah, they're fighting at two front sides, soon threatening Tokyo. But with the help of the Australians and the New Zealanders coming in, they are able to hold an a stalemate. And then over here in Papua New Guinea, since the Indonesians are mostly over here in the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand probably, they are able to capture the majority of this part, and then capturing the rest of the island, and then doing some border hopping island hopping with Australia and New Zealand. Eventually, soon threatening Indonesia's capital, Java, and they are able to start a liberation campaign into the Philippines. And then, with some aid more pouring into Japan, they're able to liberate one part of the island, but that's the only thing they can do. And then over here in Mongolia, yeah, basically, might as well just, yeah, there's no point since Russia will just pour in into the south, and China will just pour into the north. So over here, we also see another one of those, where yeah, just might as well surrender. But at the same time, Kazakhstan decides not to surrender, despite being invaded in all sides. But eventually, with the help of the Uzbeks and the Indians and the Middle Easterns, I think, they are able to go into a stalemate. And that they are able to advance more into Russian territory, soon kicking them out of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. But that also means that they are able to push the Finnish out, and then eventually capturing Estonia again. And then eventually Helsinki is captured, and then Finland is being pushed back. And then eventually, with Finland pretty much weak, yeah, they surrender. And then the Norwegians and the Swedish gets invaded in the same time. And this is what it looks like right now. So in North and South America, the blue team wins, and then in Europe, the red team is winning. In Africa, it's kind of bit in stalemate, except with the blue team winning a little. And in Asia, we also see kinda in the middle, but the red team is dominating. And then in Oceania, we only see the blue team dominating. So back in Africa, they are able to advance a little bit into the blue team, soon capturing some islands, and then soon all of Morocco falls, all of Mauritania falls, and then eventually these countries fall again, but with no more blue sides. And in this part, Guinea-Bissau gets liberated again, and then with the Africans and now, with the remaining countries now coming back to fight with the blue team, they are able to push them back a lot back into pretty much where they started. And then with the help of Egypt, they are able to advance little by little, and probably, and again, Nigeria too. They are able to advance more into the soon liberating the Republic of the Congo, eventually liberating all of Central African Republic, and then South Sudan, eventually Sudan and Eritrea. And then over here, we also see that they're able to push back the Israelis out of the Suez part, and then eventually they start the invasion of their own, soon capturing Israel, Jordan, and Syria, and a little bit of Iraq, and a little bit of Saudi Arabia, making Lebanon fully liberated. And then Cyprus, yeah, they get invaded, as well Turkey. And then eventually all Greek islands fall, and then Turkey gets invaded, and then pretty much Ankara falls, and now they're all connected. And then eventually the Caucasus are about to be invaded, and then that happens. The Caucasus already fall. So with the Arabian Peninsula now alone, except over here, well, they're advancing into Iran, soon liberating it, and then about to cut them into half. But then eventually, the Saudis are able to push them back a little, and then they are able to liberate a little bit of Jordan, and then soon going into Iraq, and then eventually into Syria, and then we either see two things happening: either either the red team is able to capture all of the Persian Gulf, cutting the blue team into two, or we see that the blue team is able to cut them into three, one right here, and one right here. Okay, probably that wasn't a good color to see it, but you'll probably know what I mean. So, which one do we see? We see the red one capturing all of the Persian Gulf, and then soon liberating Tehran, and then eventually the Persian Gulf now is Iranian. And then we also see the pushback into Iraq and Kuwait. And then eventually the Saudis are forced into this part. Soon Yemen is liberated, and then eventually the Oman and UAE falls, and eventually Saudi Arabia is fighting any two-front war. Kuwait and Qatar surrenders, and then eventually Saudi Arabia surrenders. So here we see a big defeat in the blue team, but with the Americans now sending more troops than they ever could before, I mean, mostly into Europe, they are able to force them into a little bit of the Czech Republic and Poland. And then they're able to close the Austrian Sea, soon about to go into Serbia. Soon they manage to go to Serbia, and then they are able to go into the country soon, and then soon collapsing it. And then Montenegro, Kosovo, North Macedonia, and Albania gets liberated, and a little bit of Greece. And then Poland got liberated, and then Kaliningrad got liberated. And as for Belarus, yeah, nothing happens yet. Now it happens. Belarus gets invaded. And then eventually, with no more supplies here in Northern Ireland, the UK is able to get and liberate Northern Ireland. And then over here, we see that the Swedish and the Norwegians are able to push into Finland deeply, soon liberating a lot of the country, but then soon in a stalemate with the Russians at their border. And then, yeah, we see a comeback in the blue team, but also in but also in Africa. Here we see that the blue team is able to advance more into Central Africa, soon connecting up with their lost territories, going into Nigeria. And then yeah, pretty much Nigeria collapses. And since Nigeria was strong, yeah, pretty much the red team in Africa is pretty much, yeah, pretty weak. And then we see that the Indians, the Kazakhs, and the Uzbeks are able to push the Russians out a little bit, but not a lot. But they are able to advance a lot into Iran, soon, soon going into the Caucasus, soon fully liberating it, and then going to Turkey, Iraq, Syria, Kuwait, and then they split them into two. Soon, Ankara is liberated, and so is Cyprus. Eventually, Athens is fully liberated, Bulgaria, and Romania. And let's just put in the rest of Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary. So, with this now being a big defeat for the red team, we also see that the blue team, the Canadians, the Greenlandics, probably, I think that's what they're called. I don't know. But they also, some Alaskans advance into the Siberian part of Russia. That also means that they're able to advance freely, except not because of the winter there. Yeah, it's very cold over there since since some countries aren't accustomed to the cold. Some other countries are able to advance more into the territory since their home country is very north. They are able to capture some islands, but that does cause a lot of casualties since again the cold in Siberia. And then we see that some Russians are pushing out. Like the Japanese are able to push the Russians out of the northern part since they're trying to fight back this part. And then since again the North Americans and the South Americans are dying a lot in Siberia, yeah, they're pushed back a lot. But then eventually the Canadians and the Greenlandics or and the Alaskans are able to hold off, and then soon they're into a stalemate, but not for long. And then as for Kazakhstan, yeah, because Kazakhstan and some Uzbekistanis, or Uzbeks, helped out in the Middle East, yeah, pretty much these two get completely destroyed, soon liberating Kyrgyzstan and a little bit of China, and going into Tajikistan and into Afghanistan, and a little bit into Pakistan. Soon, India is forced to fall back, soon letting the Kashmir region fall in a bloody war, and then eventually they're able to connect up with the Turkmen Sea. But with some more reinforcements going into the Middle East, they are able to liberate more of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, Oman, again more of Saudi Arabia. And then eventually Israel gets fully liberated, and so does Jordan, and so does the Saudis, making Yemen fully surrender again. Oh, that was a lot of talking. But eventually, Eritrea falls, and then they start the invasion into Sudan. Eventually, they're cut off from the sea again, and then eventually South Sudan gets invaded again, connecting up with this front, and then they start advancing into Benin, Togo, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and the other countries. Eventually, again, liberating a lot of their countries. Soon, for the third time in a row, Guinea Bissau collapses. And then over here in Europe, we see that the Algerians and some Tunisians are forcing the Moroccans to invade Spain and Portugal in the south. So, with that happening, we also see Gibraltar gets invaded. And then, yeah, since the Spanish and the Portuguese are mostly fighting over here, yeah, they pretty much advance a lot, soon threatening Lisbon and Madrid. And then eventually, so the some troops are forced to come back, making the Russians, yeah, making yeah, they're able to liberate all of Belarus and collapsing the Baltic states again and regaining Kaliningrad. And then, yeah, pretty much we see how, yeah, we with the Spanish and the Portuguese and a little bit of the French going into the Iberian Peninsula, they are able to push them back entirely, but that also meant that Poland falls again. And now they capture Berlin, and then they have East Germany. Then eventually, yeah, pretty much back to the Iron Curtain or to the Warsaw Pact and NATO originally. But they are able to hold their ground in this part of the Balkans. And then eventually, with the some Serbians now deciding to go pro-Western, they cut them off from the Russians and then cut them into the Adriatic Sea, soon liberating Slovenia, Croatia, and Bosnia, and a little bit of Hungary, and yeah, just a small portion of Slovakia. So, with a lot of people dying, yeah, they are still advancing into the war. And then they're able to go up into Belarus and then soon threaten any encirclement. Eventually, that encirclement, well, unfortunate for the Russians, that has a lot of people, and yeah, they're slowly getting thrown into the Baltic Sea. Eventually, Berlin is liberated, then yeah, they fall. And then with Kaliningrad, yeah, they pretty much capture it again, soon advancing to Belarus territory again. Soon liberating a lot of Ukraine, but not all, capturing all of Romania, Moldova, and then making the Transnistria part fall over. Once I can even get it. Oh, okay. Uh, okay. You know what? Okay. I'll just do it like that. So with Transnistria surrendering, I mean, usually I don't include uh, territories like Transnistria here, but let's just add in Transnistria for this video. And Ukraine gets liberated again, and then going into Crimea, and then with the Kiev still not liberated, they are able to advance a lot into what Russia had. Soon, any Belarusian makes any mistake, soon having the collapse of Belarus, having Minsk fall, and then they start advancing into the European side of Russia. And then they also see this, so they push. So they are forced to do a big retreat out of Sweden, the Baltics, and Finland, and let's just say Ukraine as well, just to push back the Europeans here. And then soon going into Belarus a little. And then in Asia, yeah, we basically see a stalemate for a very long time. But as some African nations and some South American nations unable to handle the Siberian cold, they are able to go into Southeast Asia, soon collapsing all of Indonesia as they capture their island of Java, and then eventually they collapse Sri Lanka and Malaysia and Brunei as well, as they liberate the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand, and Taiwan as well. And they are able to get their Kashmir region back from in India, and then they are able to get Nepal, Bhutan, and all of India again, soon collapsing all of Myanmar this time, soon cutting China off from Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia. Soon Vietnam capital Hanoi falls, and so does Laos capital falls and Cambodia falls. And then eventually, yeah, China, with the help of Taiwan and a lot more countries, yeah, they're able to advance more into China soon. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, let's just say after right there, yeah, pretty much China surrenders, North Korea surrenders, Japan gets fully liberated, South Korea is liberated, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and let's just say Lebanon has fallen again. And then let's just say with Russia now having to fight a eight from war, probably not eight, but I don't care anymore. They advance into Moscow, and with a lot more countries advancing, they close them off at all ports of the sea except this part in Siberia, since there's no point because they would have to run all the way into Siberia just to get water and then to come back. So at this point, yeah, except now they lost all sea, and they lost the Kola Peninsula, soon losing all of Moscow, advancing into a little bit of Siberia. Soon, Russia surrenders, and then since Russia fully surrendered, it's now over here. Eventually, yeah, pretty much Morocco, Mauritania, Mali gets liberated, and then eventually all of Africa decides to surrender over to the blue team. And then here we see a lot of casualties, but eventually we see one winner. And with this, let's look at the peace treaty. Okay, so here's the peace treaty. We see basically, I haven't counted again, so I haven't counted how many countries there is now, so I would say that the world gained and lost countries. So in North America, we see nothing happening. In South America, oh, and also before I get back on here, uh, also all of the neutral countries, Ireland, Costa Rica, uh, Austria, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, the microstates, what else? Turkmenistan, and yeah, others. They also came back. Yeah, they managed to come back from the waters. Okay, never mind. But here we see nothing happening in the Caribbean, in South America. We see Colombia annexing all of Venezuela and Paraguay splitting Bolivia with Chile and Brazil, with Brazil getting the northern part of Bolivia, uh, Chile rather losing a little bit of territory, but also gaining some Bolivian land. And then Paraguay is no longer landlocked, as they annex the rest of Bolivia and a little bit of some Chile coast. And over here, we see that French Guiana is now independent. Yeah, there's no more French overseas territory. Nothing much happened in Europe. Nothing happened to the UK and Northern Ireland. Nothing happened to Finland, since they can't get anything since they already collapsed. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania got more territory out of Russia and Belarus, even though they collapsed. Poland got some territory out of Belarus, while Ukraine annexed all of Belarus and all of Moldova, and also Transnistria. And we also see the return of Czechoslovakia, and again, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, the microstates, and Austria came back from the waters. And nothing happened in the Balkans except Albania annexes all of Kosovo, making them fully independent from Serbia. And Serbia is now a pro Western government. Nothing happened to Turkey nor Greece and Cyprus. And then over here, we see nothing happened to the Caucasus. and we see Israel getting some territory, and Oman annexing all of Yemen. And in Africa, we see a lot of unions being formed. And like here, yeah, this is no longer South Africa. This is either Lesotho or Eswatini, or they either merged. And this is now this. Uh, okay, so Chad, Nigeria, and all of these countries are now a part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And Algeria and all of these countries are either with Mauritania or Mali or, yeah, either, I mean, just leaving Morocco having its only border, well, except for Spain in some overseas territory type of thing. And we'll see that the Gambia is still alone like this. And Burkina Faso, despite it collapsing 3 times, nothing happened to it. And yeah, besides that, and in Oceania, nothing happened except Papua New Guinea annexing this whole entire island. And we also see that Indonesia rather gained some territory out of Malaysia and Brunei. Or, yeah, Brunei. And Singapore annexed this part of Malaysia. As for the Southeast Asia, nothing happened. As for India, they got all of Kashmir's claims. Nothing happened to Nepal and Bhutan. Again, Pakistan lost Kashmir, all of it. And nothing happened to Iran except replaced with a new government. Turkmenistan came back. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan united into one. Mongolia, nothing happened. The Korean Peninsula is now under South Korean rule. Now it's just Korea. The People's Republic of China is no more. The Communist Party died. And now, Taiwan took over. They probably cannot take over this whole entire land, but let's just say they can now. Now, Taiwan is now the new China in the Republic of China. Nothing happened to Japan. And Russia, yeah, collapsed into these new countries. The Russian Federation no longer exists. Now Russian is not a language and they speak different languages now. Yeah, okay, this was a long video and yeah, this is what happens if if the world has a country draft. Yeah. So hopefully y'all like the video and I'll see you on the next one.